I am recording this session, so if you want a copy, I'll be emailing folks actually after the event with a copy of the presentation, so you have that for your records. So thank you for joining me. Today I'm Mickey Baines. I'm founding partner here at Fourth Dimension Partners, and we are a consulting firm working with primarily adult and graduate programs on various recruitment and marketing issues. Generally, my 20-second elevator speech. If enrollment's not going the way you want it, we come in and help fix things. So that's generally what we do, and that's the extent of the sales part of this. All right, so let's get started. Thank you for joining me for this session on information sessions. I did a webinar similar to this last year, and I revamped it some. As I've learned more and as I've been working with a couple of schools, particularly on information sessions. So I wanted to update this and offer it again, and it was I'd say a pretty popular session. It filled up relatively quickly for us. So we will be together this afternoon or this morning if you're on the West Coast, for right at an hour, maybe just under an hour. I did this at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and I'm doing it now, and I think it lasted about 55 minutes, and that included questions. So we've got 60 minutes. I'm going to use all the time for the 60 minutes. I'm not going to present for 40 minutes and then spend 20 minutes trying to sell you something, and I'm not going to take 90 minutes worth of material and try to cram it into 60 minutes, all right? My angle, I just want to help you improve your information sessions. I want to be sure that as we think about these important events for our prospective students, that we are setting the right goals, that we have the right frame of mind as we plan the event so that we can have the best success possible. I won't be selling anything to you. I won't be preaching. I won't be preaching what I don't practice, with the exception of one bullet point at the very end, and I'll point that out and call myself on the carpet for it. And then at the end, we should have 10 or so minutes left over for some questions, and I'll be glad to answer them. If I'm covering something now that you don't understand, throw your hand up electronically, or type in the question pane. I'll have both of those open, and I'll be monitoring those throughout the session. I will say my question pane is on one screen and my presentation is on the other. So if I miss your question, that's okay. Ask it again, throw your hand up and down, and it'll catch my eye, and then I'll stop and pause and answer your question for you. Other than that, let's go ahead and get started. So expectations. I want to be clear as we're getting into this. I wish that I could give you a magic potion, or I had a magic wand that I could wave around, and we could go back to the way it was 10 years ago, and we would have 100 people showing up for an information session or an open house for our continuing ed programs. When I did this session last time, we had some folks from some traditional programs attending, and those programs typically may have a little larger of an audience still. You might find open houses or visit days that have a couple hundred people, 300 people, or so a good number like that showing up. But other than that, for most adult programs, rarely are we having events that host 100 people anymore. It's just not that popular. Things have changed. Time's more urgent for folks these days, and I wish I could give you a potion that's going to get you back to 100 people, but that doesn't exist. So to be clear, I'm not a witch doctor. I like to look at some tried and true things that I've tried over the past 5 years, and even as much as this past year, that we've done to try to increase engagement, which means increase participation, attendance, and conversion from our open houses and information sessions. And to be even clear about this, this is me, not me, not the witch doctor here. Again, me, that's my mini-me, but that's not me. So we don't have a whole lot of magic going on here. Let's look at what I've done and maybe throw out some ideas and things that you've done and see if we can't help your attendance. So let's start with framing our mindset. First off, I want to be sure as you're planning your event that you're having goals. And when I say goals, I don't mean enrollment goals. And I also don't just mean I want to have 30 people show up. We want to go beyond that. So we want to have a goal on the number of people who are attending your event. We should have a goal on what those who leave your event walk away with. What is their next step that you want them to do, that they know that, and they're getting something of value. If they're not going to get something of value, they're not going to pay attention to you. And that's critically important, not just for this event, but with all of the communication that you're having with them. We also want to have a goal for who we want to attend and how we want them to find out about us. As long as we set those types of goals, then it'll help us in the planning process, and it'll help us find ways to build a program that meets our expectations or exceeds them. But generally what I find when I go to a school, or if we start talking about open houses, I'll ask, well, how many people do you want to have? As many as we can get. And that's great, but that also doesn't give us a parameter. So does that mean you want to spend $20,000 advertising for this event? Oh, no, we don't want to spend that. Well, let's talk a little clearly about however many we can get. What does that mean specifically? Because that now will help us guide us on some of our decisions. Do we advertise? How much do we advertise? Do we just look internally at our pipeline to see who we're inviting? All of that comes into play, and we need to think about that as we're building out the plan. Otherwise, what will actually happen is if you want 50 and you don't tell anyone that's what you're shooting for, then marketing won't put enough effort into it. You'll have 20 and people will be disappointed and upset. And we want to set expectation for everyone. Another thing to think about this is when we think about how many people attend, we want to look at how many people you typically have attending and how many people you want to have attend. And let's look at the gap. So are you trying to go from 5 to 30 attendees? Or are you trying to go from 12 to 20? Because those are two different scenarios. If you're going from 5 to 30, you're not going to tweak a couple of things about your event and get there. That's going to be some significant change. That might include reimagining your entire event. But if you want to go from 12 to 20, we might be able to tweak some things and get you towards that goal. But you need to start thinking now about how many you have and where you want to be, because that'll help you start thinking about, as we go through this afternoon and beyond, how much do you really need to change to start meeting your expectation? Or do you need to change your expectation? If you say, I can't reimagine it, I just need to tweak things, well, then you don't need to be setting a goal at 30 if you only have 5 people show up. Okay, so why is attendance down? Now I'm going to answer this with another question, and it's a question you already know the answer to. Do students search, inquire, apply, and enroll in the same way they did 10 years ago? Of course they don't. We know they don't. That's okay. But what I typically find is the way that we engage. So here's the next question. Let me rephrase it this way. Has your advertising, the media you choose for your advertising, the advertising marketing messages, and your application processes changed as drastically as the way students inquire, apply, and enroll? Rarely has it made that same amount of change. So if they've done a 180 and we rotated 20 degrees, those are two different amounts of change and they're still not matching. We're trying to reach out to them the same way we did 20 years ago, or not 20, maybe 10 years ago. And let's just show you a couple examples. And if you're sitting in the room today and your school is about to show up in one of these images, I apologize. I just pulled them off online just to kind of give some ideas here. So here's the first one. This is for, I don't know, Duane College, I think it is. College of It'll Change Everything, right? Change is one of those buzzwords. You'll find that a lot. Realize your dreams. Life-changing Lakes College. And as a side real quick, the young lady in this upper billboard is a stock photo. I highly recommend not using stock photos unless you need something very quickly and you have 0 photos that are worthwhile that you can use. On top of that, this particular young lady has been used in many industries and many different clip art images and stock photos over the past 18 months. So if you see her, don't use her because she's everywhere. I almost have a name for it at this point because I see her in so many things. Here's another buzzword. We're talking about the future. We want to train for a career with a brilliant future. We want to build a future. We want to say the future is yours. Our future awaits, or your future awaits, and let your future soar. All of these buzzwords. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use those words, but what I will say is if you're using those words, just take a quick look. And in 10 minutes, I found these online. If I could find this amount of common buzzwords online in 10 minutes, how often are those words really being used? Consider that, because you don't want your message to fall in the fray of everyone else. You want to find a way to stand out. And if you're not standing out, people aren't going to see your advertisements, whether it's about an open house or whether it's about a program you have starting or the fall semester, whatever it is you're advertising for, they're not going to get it. So as we think about advertising and promoting our events, we have to think about targeting our audience. And when you registered for the event, there was 2 questions on the form I asked to kind of help me understand what's actually happening. And the first was, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back up. I'm sorry. The first thing we want to do is I was skipping a whole slide, so I apologize. You must first view your event through the eyes of your prospect, and to be able to do that, you have to answer 3 questions. All right, you need to be able to see it the way they see it, and that's hard when you have the filter on that we have, knowing our industry inside and out. But here's the first question: what does your prospect see, think, hear, or feel when she comes across your information promoting your event? In the same question, what does she see, think, hear, feel when she arrives to the event? Because impressions will be formed immediately, and if you're not setting the right impression once she arrives to the event, you could lose her before she even steps inside of a building. At the last program I ran before I became a consultant, I've been consulting now for 5 years, but when I was running a program here, our open houses were serious business for us. So we went to the extent of not worrying about having public safety at a parking lot for us so we could have spaces reserved. We would take care of reserving spaces, but we took it a step further. We had professional staff in the parking lot ready to meet cars as they pulled in, to greet them, show them where to park. We had other staff members ready to greet them when they got out of their cars, to kind of direct them and point them directly to the building they want, because on a college campus that has lots of buildings, they can get lost easily. And we could put out signs, and signs will get them there. That's good, but we wanted to go a step beyond that because we're setting that impression. And one of the things we sold hard was the convenience and the service that we provided. And greeting you in the parking lot was the first step we had for that, right? And then this third question, and this one really is the most important of these 3 questions. It's one thing to know what she's thinking and seeing and hearing and feeling when she comes across your information, but before you even get there, what information do you want her, or what do you want her to see? What do you want her to think, hear, or feel when she comes across your information? If you know that answer first, you can put that into your content and try to make her feel that. Because then if you go about it that way, you have a better likelihood that she responds, that she acknowledges, remembers, RSVPs, and shows up. Now, who should attend your event? Now, this is where I was going earlier. So I asked the question, who are you typically targeting your events for? And I worded them a little differently, but what I was trying to get to here is, are you targeting brand new inquiries at your event? Are you targeting older inquiries that are already in your pipeline? Are you targeting applicants, people who've applied but not exactly completed their application? Are you trying to get a combination of new and old inquiries, or a combination of all of those groups? Or are you actually having events but segmenting and only having one event for new inquiries, and a different type of an event for inquiries in your pipeline, and a different type of event for applicants? And so that was a question I asked, and what I did was I took this from the last time I offered a webinar like this. I actually asked the same question. I took that data and added your data as well as the data from the group in the 11 a.m. session this morning, and compiled it all so we can start building a little bit more data on it. And so this is what I've come up with. 18% of the people who answered that question said they're targeting specifically new inquiries. 10% were targeting inquiries already in their pipeline. 4% targeting applicants. 2% a combination of new and older inquiries. And here's where the bulk of the lion's share goes. A combination of everyone, all of your applicants, new and old inquiries in the pipeline, that's 61%. And I will tell you that when I did this a year ago, that number was around 66%. So it dropped a little bit. And segmented events for each group, 6%. Now that actually doubled. That number is 6%. It was only at 3% last time. And so now we're up to 6%. There. Now, there's not enough data here that I've collected to make this, statistically valid, but it does kind of help us understand a little bit about who we're targeting. And what I wanted to do next is kind of show you the other question I asked is how many people attend your events. So again, I took your data, added it to the last time I did this, and then I segmented it by how you're focusing. So everyone that said they're focusing their events for new inquiries averaged out about 9.3 inquiries. Or 9.3 attendees per session. Folks who are targeting people already in their pipeline were getting about 11. People who are targeting applicants were getting 5.2. A combination of new and old prospects were getting 10. Combination of everyone, 14. And the segmented group, 16.4. Now, again, this isn't enough data really collected to be relevant, but I will share with you, I would propose if we did do a big study on this particular question, we would find that the segmented group always, that last group, always has a little bit more because it's a little more targeted. And when you target a specific group like that, you can really hone in on the content that you're presenting at the event as well as what you're promoting at the event to make it more attractive for folks. The group above that, the combination of applicants and prospects, that should be higher because at least higher than the ones above it because that's a larger group of people you're inviting. You're doing some advertising. You're inviting all your current leads in the pipeline as well as your current applications or applicants. So you should have a little bit higher number attending on that one. Does your target group matter? And of course, the answer to that is yes. So we want to think about the type of content we use to draw in new prospects versus prospects in the pipeline versus applicants because it does matter. Their interest levels may be different. Someone who's coming to an open house to complete an application is someone who's pretty committed at that point. They've applied. It's not exactly done yet, but they're taking time out of their day to come to your campus to actually complete their application versus someone who is just thinking about going back to school. I'm not sure yet. Their interest level and commitment to going back and to your institution isn't the same. And their readiness to enroll may be different. If I'm just thinking about it now, I'm not ready to enroll in the session that starts next week, most likely. So we have to think about that. And as you think about that and start segmenting groups out like that, that will help you in terms of planning, in terms of timeline, when you communicate, what media you use, because it will matter. And we'll talk on that in just a moment. In addition to that, while inquiries and applicants need to know about similar topics, just like financial aid for matter, they both want to know about financial aid. What they want to know about financial aid at an open house may be different. So an inquiry may want to know, are loans and grants available at all? What is a FAFSA? Where an applicant may need to know what documents are outstanding, or they might want to have someone help read an award letter they've received so they can understand that a little bit more. And if you try to keep it so broad as an inquiry to say this is what a FAFSA is, and you've got an audience of applicants out there, you're going to bore them. They're going to get tired and they're going to zone out and not pay any attention to you, and it's going to take a whole lot just to bring them back. And on the flip side of that, if you start talking about here's the school code, we need this particular type of documentation outstanding, and you start going in too much detail for a few students, those who haven't even started a FAFSA are going to get lost. They'll be confused and they won't know what to do. The broader you make your audience, new inquiries fresh off the street to applicants completing an application, the broader you make it, the broader the information has to be to try to address everyone. And inevitably, at some point, there's a threshold where you cross where you start not providing the right information for anyone, and they might not be happy about that. And that's going to impact your conversion rate. All right, let's talk a little about planning. And this is an important question to ask as you're going into planning for an event. Are you having an information session or are you having an open house? And we use those terms loosely in our world. But if you think about what an actual information session is versus what an actual open house is, they're really two different things. And I don't want to overread into terms too much, but if we already have a perception about what a word means, it can throw things off. So open house is a term that more people will have an idea of what that is in their mind. Why? Well, in real estate, if you've ever looked at a home, you might go in on an open house day. And if we have an open house on a home I want to see Sunday from 2 to 4, I know that I can stop in at 2, or I know I can stop in at 3:30 or 3:45, take a look on my own, have some handouts, a cookie. If the realtor's kind enough to bring some snacks, ask a couple of questions and take off. I'm in and out at my own pace. And if you're advertising an open house, but you're having more of a formal setting with a presentation that starts at 5 or right when your event starts, and I'm thinking open house, I might come in at 6:15 and 6:30 and have missed the majority of what it was you were discussing. So we weren't on the same page, and then I'm going to be confused I'm not going to know what's going on, and I might be intimidated and walk away. Information sessions can be perceived to be formal, PowerPoint style like this. We want to cover certain materials starting at this particular time, and open house is something that's a little more informal. You need to think about what type of event you need to have, and then use the right term for it so you can set expectations for folks who are coming in. So if it's an event from 5 to 7 and you're doing a presentation at 5, you need to say that. This is an information session that begins at 5 p.m. Sorry. Okay. Impact of the time of year. It matters about the type of event you have, how you go about recruiting for it and promoting it based on when in the year you're having it. It can have impact here. And I always like to look at this 4-quadrant matrix. Obviously, the group I want to target for my events almost always is that upper right-hand quadrant, those who have the highest interest in my program and are readiest to enroll. However, that lowest, that low quadrant on the left-hand side, the low interest early consideration, those are just kind of kicking the tires a little bit. That's not necessarily a group I don't want to target. However, depending upon when you're having this event, you may or may not want to target this group. So I was down in North Carolina last week with a school, and we were looking at one of their grad programs. And I asked them, if I'm looking to enroll next semester, when's the latest time I can really get the process started and still have enough time to get it done, get everything done and be ready to enroll? And their turnaround time was 3 weeks. If it's less than 3 weeks for that particular graduate program, they're not going to be able to get me in time, or there's no guarantee of it. So if I'm having an open house and it's 4 weeks out from the start of a session, that lower left-hand quadrant isn't necessarily the target group I want for this event, because that's going to be a very difficult and time-consuming group to turn around. If I've got a lot of extra staff, great. But if I don't, and I need to target my time a little more carefully, I don't want to start there. That would be the last of these 4 quadrants, a group of people that I want to see, or I want to focus on. I'm going to start with the upper right-hand quadrant. And then I need to make a decision. Do I want the upper left-hand or the lower right-hand quadrant? Those who are with high interest and early, but are still early in the process, or those that have shown low interest but are closer to being ready to enroll? So say my application is complete. I just haven't really been engaging and saying I'm ready to start. Which of those two do I want to target first? And eventually I want to hit both, but if I'm going to do some individual contact, that's where I would do training. I've done some training with admissions teams and started looking at which of those 2 quadrants do we want to focus on and what do we say to each, because our communication with them would be very different. But again, the timing of it's going to be different. Now, if I'm looking to start, say I want to start or have an open house for a fall semester, June might be the time for an open house with that lower left-hand quadrant, whereas late July might be that upper right-hand quadrant. And while I'm saying this, I'm going to add another note to this. If you're having an information session or open house in July, the later half of July, early August, one thing to think about, in addition to how quickly can you get them turned around and how much of your advertising dollars do you want to invest to bring in people, can you spend a lot of advertising dollars, get them in and turn them around in time for some August start? In addition to that, you have to keep in mind that July and August are the 2 busiest months for our advertising in our world. So if you're going to be putting out billboards or radio campaigns, digital campaigns, those types of things, you need to think about the other schools that are going to be out there in your neck of the woods. Some areas are more competitive than others. One of our attendees right now, Mary Ellen, I know Mary Ellen well. She's up about an hour north of me in a fairly densely populated area with about 5 schools that are all competing against one another, right? So if you're trying to advertise your program there, you want to think about what message you're putting out in July and August very carefully, because it's very easy to get caught in the middle of everyone else's message. So if you're talking about changing your future by attending an open house, you might find the exact same type of message elsewhere. So you've got to really differentiate yourself if you're trying to advertise in July and August, which for me is a reason to say, hey, let me advertise in June for a June event, and then take my July event to hone in on that upper right quadrant. And I will sacrifice quantity for quality because I know I don't have a whole lot of time. I don't have my message, my ROI on my dollars isn't going to be as high in July with everyone else out there for that particular event. Let me use my dollars elsewhere and really focus in on that. That might be a target, a way I might target my dollars and my attendance and my events. Promoting your event. Again, this is what I was just talking about. The target group dictates your media. If you are going for brand new inquiries, then you know you need to do more advertising, obviously. And this is another, and I just referenced it briefly, but another instance where timing matters. If your promotional efforts hone in on online or digital campaigns, the thing, if you don't already know, and you probably do, is what you want to know about that group is it's harder to convert those online leads than it is someone who heard you on the radio and contacted you, or someone you picked up at a fair or an employment career fair type of an event. The way you convert them, the amount of time you have to spend converting those leads is different. So if you've got 4 weeks time or even 2 weeks time to get someone in and turned around, and you want to use advertising, as cheap as online ads may be, it's still going to be more challenging, or could be more challenging, for you to get those leads converted in time for August because they're softer. They take more time to engage and work. They're not as interested, they're not as ready as a lead who hears you on the radio and then takes the initiative to go find you online and then looks at information and then fills out a form. They've shown more interest at that point. So they're usually not as difficult to convert as these online leads. So you have to keep that in mind. A lot of my work over the past 18 months is helping schools differentiate their online leads that they get versus other leads as we think about how to recruit and connect and engage those folks. As I said, timing may dictate assertiveness. So if you're trying to get new inquiries in the door in late July, you have to work really hard and you have to think about that, knowing, okay, I need new inquiries. We're getting them in. It's late July. I've got 2 weeks to get them in and turn around. Then you need to think about how you're communicating. Even after the event, when they leave, what are you doing to follow up continuously to get them ready to go? You want to think about that ahead of the game. Don't wait till after the event. Come in the next morning tired and then say, okay, now how do we convert them? Have that already lined up. And if you have a tool, most of you do, some type of CRM or other electronic tool that allows you to build some automated communication, that will be critical for this group. We talked already about the target group, but we want to think about what it is that will attract an inquiry to an open house versus an applicant, because there are different things that are going to attract them. We can't lump them all in the same category. And again, this is, I don't know why I put these important questions at the end. This is the most important one here. Why is it important that the prospect attend now, attend this event? So if I'm holding this in June for an August start, why is it important for me to come now? If I don't know that, I'm not going to take action on it. And if you're advertising 3 or 4 weeks out from your event and I hear about it now and it's not until November 20th, I'm going to ask myself, do I really need to stop what I'm doing now to RSVP for this event? Why do I need to do that? Or I'm going to say, oh, I'll just do it later. But if that message doesn't get in front of me again in 2 weeks, I'm going to forget about it and I won't ever RSVP for your event. So you have to think about the importance, the urgency. Why is it important to come now? You know, if I'm an applicant and it's 4 weeks before the session starts and I've got 1 week to get it all done, the importance to come now is to say, we want to help work you through this application. You've got 1 week to get this done. I'm going to be here, available, ready to talk to you and work it out and set up a plan, but we have to do it now. Oh, okay, I get it. But you have to think about that. Why is it important now? That's easy at the end. It's not as easy when it's 3 months out. So you have to think about that. This is a typical email. I've modified it slightly that I may get from schools, and there's enough of you in this room, I think, that have heard from me over time, know that I do a secret shopper study every year. Last year was 80 schools where you kind of monitor how schools are recruiting. We're changing it up a little bit this year. We'll make that announcement closer in the winter. However, you know, in that study, I get to see lots of emails, and this is a slightly modified version of an email that I might get from a school. especially when trying to get me to attend an event. So, Susan, here's a cool tagline for MBA University. And when I say that, that's get on the train to career training at MBA University, something along those lines. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, having that tagline up front, that was the hook. That drew them in. That's what pushes them away now. As soon as you start with a cheesy line like this, and I'm not saying everyone's tagline's cheesy, but when you start that way, you've already said up front, Susan, here's a sales email. Will you read it? Who reads sales emails? No one. You're starting out with lots of cheddar cheese there. It's very cheesy. Let's get rid of it. Keep going. At MBA University, you can go back to school and still balance your important work and home commitments. MBAU offers flexible scheduling with evening, weekend, and online classes and accelerated timeframes. All the way down to the final paragraph. It's easy to become part of our learning community, and now it's time to learn more. Join us for an open house November 5th from 5:30 to 7:30, and we'll help you take the next step to get enrolled. Now, let me shrink this a little bit for you, and let's point out a few things. One, the one thing everyone always notices, the first letter of Susan's name is not capitalized. And this happens regularly. And it's one of the things I started doing a little bit last year. We didn't include it in our study because I wasn't consistent with it. But as we're filling out inquiry forms, we just started using a first name that didn't have the first letter capitalized just to see if someone would catch it and change it. With our online forms and our automation now, when someone fills out that form, that information goes almost directly somewhere else or is copied and pasted somewhere else. And many people, including, I think 3 or 4 that signed up for the webinar, did so by not capitalizing the first letter of their name. That's just how we fill out forms now. Fine, no problem. But if you use that field to merge into an email, then it's going to look like this. And it already starts us off with a bad taste in someone's mouth potentially. They don't realize necessarily why it's occurring this way. And if they do realize why it's occurring this way, they're going to know that you didn't even touch anything in their record or that someone was too lazy to do that. That's the way I look at it myself, personally. Next, I already mentioned, was this tagline. We want to get rid of that. And the third thing, and this is really an important one, the event that we're talking about, November 5th from 5:30 to 7:30 is at the very bottom. That's the call to action. That's what we want this person to do. We want them to sign up for an event, and we put all that information at the bottom. But what we need to keep in mind is that call to action needs to be in the first 2 or 3 lines of the email because we don't read that all. 19 out of 20 people that would get this email would not read down to where it gives the date. So we're putting together an email for 5% of people. Additional questions to think about with this email. Is it customized? Not really. It's personalized with the first name without a capital letter, but that's about it. Is this email for an inquiry and applicant? It's primarily for an inquiry. You could maybe argue that it's broad enough to maybe cover someone who's applied, maybe like a stealth app who doesn't know much. Maybe, but you could argue that it's exclusively for an applicant. It's just not there. So if your emails are like this and you're trying to invite everyone, you want to segment your audience. Invite inquiries with a different message than you use with your applicants. New inquiries, when you follow up with them before the event, should get a different message than someone who an inquiry is already in your pipeline. The other thing about this email, you don't want to make your message too long, and that's a completely other webinar, and we won't touch on that too much, other than, what I would need to get out of this email is, what will I get from attending the event? What do I know? And I know we've got some bullet points there, but that's something that's probably copied and pasted off of someone's website. I'll bet if I track down the school that this email belongs to and then go to the website, I'm going to find those same bullet points somewhere. If I can see it on your website, putting in the email doesn't make it stand out to me. What is it I'm going to get from coming to this event? That's what we want to be thinking about. Again, the call to action, I'm not going to get to that call to action. In addition, the call to action, by the way, doesn't even have a link to click in this particular message. Here's a slightly revamped email. Susan, I wanted to invite you to MBAU's open house next Thursday. I know it's a crazy time, but we'll keep things informal. You can drop in anytime between 5:30 and 7:30. We'll have veggies, cheeses, snacks for you and your children to hold you over until dinner. And we also have students from our elementary ed program hosting activities for the kids to give you time you need to ask questions. We'll get you in and out in 20 minutes. Click here to RSVP. Now, there's 2 links in there. Now, I took a little bit of an advantage here of assuming that I know a little bit more about Susan than most schools will be able to do, and that's fine. There are other ways to word this email without knowing this. Obviously, I wouldn't have written this email to Susan or had it automated if I didn't know she had kids, probably young kids if we have elementary ed students with activities for kids. But if I know that Susan's a mom with young kids, I have to think, and this is where we're trying to think of it from her perspective, why wouldn't she be able to come on a Thursday night? Well, it's 5:30 to 7:30. How long is it going to take me? Do I need to be there all 2 hours? I've got kids. How am I going to get them dinner? Those are things that might be going through her mind. So what I want to do is understand what her objections or hurdles are and remove them out if I'm addressing them. So we've got snacks that'll hold you over until dinner. Drop in. It's informal and you can drop in any time. We'll get you in and out in 20 to 30 minutes. We've got activities for your kids so that you have time to ask the questions you need to ask. All those types of things. If I know that about her, then I can word an email for that. And I don't mean every person gets their own individual email. I just have to know how many of them have young kids. That's the type of email that I want to get to that person. Again, that's a whole different webinar. Okay. Pre-event follow-up. As we think about the follow-up we need to do prior to the event, I always email, and this would be an automated email, a reminder that either the day before or the morning of. And depending upon my group, so if I've got people who RSVP'd for an event a month ahead of time, I'm probably going to send both of those emails. One the day before, one the morning of. I was working with a community college one time, and we had one of their open enrollment days where people can come on and take their placement test, advise, and register all on the same day. And what I did was, not only did we send that day before reminder to let folks know that RSVP'd, and the event was from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So at 1 p.m. the day of the event, anyone who had not checked in, and this is a little bit manual, I went pulled them. If they had checked in, I pulled them out. Everybody that was left that had not yet checked in for the day got an email at 1:30 reminding them, hey, we're still here to 6 o'clock. Don't forget to come out. That last minute reminder is going to be critically important. I also have staff call the day before. So if you've RSVP'd for my event, whatever admissions rep I have assigned to you is going to be the person calling you. On occasion, when we've had 100 and some odd people to an event, and that's usually at a community college where I've most recently done that, I might have students help do some of the calls, but for the most part, we have staff do those calls the day before. Now, I don't just tell the staff, go have a call, because that's not what we want to do. Why are they calling? Let's have a purpose for the call. The call is, let's remind you that the event's tomorrow. It is 5:30 to 7:30. It is informal, so you don't have to be there right at 5:30 if that doesn't work for you. And if you are there at 5:30, great. I'll be looking for you. We'll get you in and out in 20 minutes. We want to just reiterate those things so that they forgot about the email when they signed up. They forgot that we have activities for kids or that we have snacks for them, that we can remind them of that. Again, we're just calling to reiterate and remove those hurdles. If they say they can't come, great. We're going to take their name off the list, and we're going to set up an appointment with them at a different time. So what is the purpose of the call? It isn't just to say, hey, there's this event tomorrow that you signed up for. It's to remind them why they're coming. And if they can't come, let's know now, and let's go ahead and schedule that. So for the event, when we're planning for the event specifically, this is a really important question. And you need to answer this, and your staff, anyone that's going to be from your team at the event, needs to know the answer to this question. What do you want your attendees' next step to be? And it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. But if you know we have new inquiries, we have folks that have been in the pipeline for a while, and we have applicants. For each of them, the attendees need to know explicitly what is their next step toward enrollment. If they don't know that when they leave, you failed. You have failed them. You've failed the program. If they do not know specifically what they need to do when they leave to continue the enrollment process, you missed an important opportunity. And when you follow up with them after the event, we're going to talk about that next slide, but when you follow up, does that follow-up specifically reiterate what you tell them at the event when they leave? If what I've seen happen is at the open house for inquiries, new and old inquiries, we've got this checklist, and every student gets this checklist. Here's our application checklist. You do these 12 things. Not what you want to do. If you want to use a checklist, great. But each person, as they're leaving, you highlight for them on that sheet of 12 where they are and what the next one is. So if they're an applicant and you need official transcripts, highlight official transcripts. Tom, what we need here is these official transcripts. I'm going to highlight this for you because that's your next step. Once we get those, we can do blah, 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 blah. But you need to know specifically what that next step is. If you need to go online to this page to fill out a FAFSA, fine. If you need to go to this page to start the application, fine. But whatever it is, I shouldn't leave that event without you telling me what that next step is. And when you follow up, you need to reiterate that. Post-event. So now we've had the event. What are we going to do to follow up? So hopefully you all have a communication plan. And I don't care if it's automated in a tool or if it's a manual written out, we want to do this after the event. That's fine as long as you have a plan. You may or may not have automated messages go out, but I want to be able to communicate with everyone that RSVP'd that showed, as well as everyone who didn't show. I like to be able to reach out to them. Tom, sorry we missed you yesterday. I had Professor Smith from the business program. He was going to talk. He talked to some of the folks about XYZ. Just want to touch base with you and see if we can't set up an appointment. Something along those lines, and that can be a phone call and or an email. I prefer to do both at that point. And then for everyone who did come, I still want to call them. I still want to email them. I'm going to call, Tom, good seeing you last night. Remember, I highlighted that next step on your application checklist. We need transcripts. Here are the links. I'm sending you an email with links to Stanford University online transcript request form and Cornell University online transcript request form. They're there. All you have to do is click, fill them out, and that'll get us the transcripts sooner rather than later. Takes a little bit more work to do that particular email, but that is taking the extra step and initiative for the prospect. You're giving them the next step for them, removing some of those hurdles. Okay, those are the 4 main points I wanted to hit. Now I'm going to give you 6 tips. I'm not sure if anybody in this session is already doing or thinking about doing online information sessions, but I've had people ask over the past, so I've got a few tips here. Number 1, I don't care if it's a faculty member or a staff member. If they've never presented routinely, frequently in an online session, then you don't let them speak for more than a minute unless they have a lot of practice. And when I say practice, for me, that means putting them in front of the microphone and the computer with 2 or 3 people standing right over their shoulder or beside them and staring at them. Make them nervous, intimidate them, break them down till they can get this handled. All right, now I'll tell you why in just a moment. Here's the 3rd bullet point, and this is the one where I'm going to call myself on the carpet. There's been studies that show for the online sessions, you want to limit the number of bullet points. Inevitably what happens, and if you look here at this first bullet point, all that text, you start reading that when it comes on the screen and you're not hearing what the speaker's saying. And as soon as that starts to occur, you lose focus and you miss important information. So you want to limit the bullet points. I did in this particular session by showing you some specific emails, and you try to incorporate images and things. And for this particular webinar, probably more than any, I should have worked harder on that, but you want to start thinking about it. It is high on my mind. I just came across this study. It wasn't just higher ed, by the way, but I came across that about 6 weeks ago, and I haven't had a time yet to go back and rethink things. But bullet points, reduce them. Other 3 more tips. Stand while you present if you're doing it online. This is just a quick shot from my desk. You can see I've got one of those little extensions that kind of raise my computer so that I can stand. If you're presenting in front of a room of people, you rarely, if ever, sit when you're presenting. And if you do, because that's your style, great. But when you're doing it online, stand. And the reason you want to do that, if you're not dynamic, you're dead. You know, John Maxwell, the leadership guru, talks a lot about communication. And I guess the common saying I was always familiar with was 90% of all communication is nonverbal. And he actually put a more definitive number to it. I think he calls it 93.4% or something like that of communication is nonverbal. That leaves less than 7% of communication being verbal, and that's the only medium we really have. I've got a visual here, but you don't see me move. You can't feel energy. And when that's the case, it's very easy to lull people. And that's why you want to have someone, if you're monotone and you're not very energetic when you speak, you're not the right person to present in an online information session. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're just not the best person to present. This needs to be energetic. It needs to be enthusiastic, because the purpose of an event like this is to get someone excited about trying to enroll and being ready to enroll. And if you can't be dynamic, you're not going to do that. And if you're sitting down, you become more complacent. It's not the same as when you stand. Finally, record it. This is one of my weaknesses as well. I always forget to record my webinars. I did remember this one. I forgot to record the one from the morning session, but I remember to record this one. One of the keys to recording it isn't just to give it to those who attend. Yeah, we can do that. Whoop-de-doo. What we really want to do here is record it so that someone else behind the scenes, someone at the institution, third party, can listen to it and provide feedback. That's critical, because you don't know, and if you're like me, a lot of people are in this particular way, that I can't stand to listen to myself. I don't want to hear myself. I don't know, I just cringe. I don't like it. So I like to hand that off to someone, and I'm going to give that to my wife, and she patiently, more than patiently listens, and she gives me more than honest feedback, more honest than anyone else for me. But I want to be able to hand that to someone to listen to. Let them hear it, give you feedback. They might hear the extra 46 ums you throw in there that you don't always hear. They might find nuances and breaks where you don't. They might find information out of order. Those types of things. That's why you want to let someone else review it. Okay. This is my one sales slide. What do we do? I already told you we help fix enrollment problems. You can see it. If you want to know more, I'll tell you more. Aside from that, questions. I want to open it up to you for now. It's 2:49. We have just 5-6 minutes. If you have questions, raise your hand, type in the question pane. I'll be glad to answer those. Is there anything that we didn't cover you thought I would? What is it that you were least understanding about? I'd be glad to answer those. I'll hang out for a couple of minutes. If you can, as soon as I do close out, there's a survey. It's only a few questions. It'll take no more than 3 minutes. It helps me improve our sessions. And if you don't have time, you'll get an email tomorrow as a reminder to fill that survey out. But that feedback is always critical for me. Any questions before I wrap up? It's been a quick 50 minutes here, so I want to be able to use your time wisely here. All right. I'll hang out another minute. If you have a question, type it in. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you or electronically see you through a webinar again soon. All right. Thank you.